Hi, everyone. It's meteorologist Joe Chaffee on this Thursday, and we've got a lot going on around the country. Just want to show you the National Weather Service display of watches and warnings that are up in advisories. And we have a few winter weather advisories up along in parts of northeastern Wisconsin, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And we also have winter storm warnings up for parts of Wyoming, winter weather advisories elsewhere, kind of scattered down through parts of Colorado. Also have a couple of winter storm watches in the mix. And the red, I'm thinking the red is for fire risk today for the excessively dry conditions, although I don't know why it would be excessively dry in the Southwest, because it's always excessively dry in the Southwest. But nonetheless, they actually haven't had very much rain over the winter months across much of this area, so it's probably even drier than it usually is. Anyhow, just want to start things off a little differently today. I want to look at a couple of things with regards. I just want to show you the temperature profiles over the next 3 days across the eastern two-thirds of the United States. And, it's starting to become more and more evident as we see temperatures beginning to move up as we get now close to the beginning of the month of May. And we are going to see warmer air here in the east. You can see it here extending up into New England for Friday afternoon with temperatures in the 70s and 80s from Virginia south. Now, here's the really warm day, and it's probably underdone. I think you're going to probably see 80s reach up into southern New England here. And you've got the temperatures well into the 80s, probably even a few 90-degree readings wouldn't surprise me at all around the Washington, D.C., Baltimore area. But you also have some pretty cold air for this time of year anyway, with 30s and 40s across much of the plains and 30s into the Central Rockies. By the way, these temperatures are over 100 in parts of inland South Texas. Now, on Sunday, we have a bit of a backdoor front issue that develops, and you can see the outcome of this. Now, there will be some sun in the mix, so that will make temperatures higher than they otherwise would be. It's not going to be a situation where you're going to get into a lot of low clouds and a deep marine layer. You also see the beginnings of the next system here, or actually it's already progressed at this point on Sunday with the warm air. Here's the warm sector. This is where the area where you would probably wind up seeing severe weather. And we have the colder air on the northeast and northwest side, and there is some modeling wants to produce some snow up through parts of northern Wisconsin and in through the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and in through Minnesota. That was my phone. I sometimes forget to turn the volume down, which I am now doing. Okay, sorry about that. So you can see how the temperature profile is going to be going forward. And here's a Monday afternoon. And, when you want to you can look at a temperature map and really kind of figure out where the fronts are. You just look where the temperature gradient gets rather tight. So you've got 70s to near 80 up along the coast, and then you drop back to 60s, 50s, and 40s. So there is going to be some kind of front like that. Your warm front's up here somewhere, and your low is moving across through the eastern lakes. You can see the drawdown of colder air that comes down behind it. All right, so you can just kind of look at a temperature map, and you can oftentimes figure out what's going on just looking at that one particular map. And then notice that for next week, it gets quite cool across much of the eastern part of the United States for a number of days, except for the odd day in the middle. And this is going to be reflecting the pattern that we're going into, which is going to be essentially a strong blocking pattern. So we're going to go back. We'll come back to this a little later on and see what the implications are with regards to this. Here's a hint for a week for next Saturday morning, with low pressure sitting over eastern Lake Huron, a very intense low for this time of year anyway. But we're going to start back at the beginning and come back to this in just a little bit. So there were your watches and warnings and advisories. Here's the severe weather risk for today, where we have just a marginal risk of severe weather over a rather large area running down along and just west of the Appalachians from southern Alabama and Georgia all the way up through Ohio and into western New York, and then another marginal area of severe weather risk in Kansas, northern Texas, and northwestern Oklahoma. And this is going to be in response to the next developing storm. And when we look at the suggested severe weather risk for Friday, it is extensive. And this actually carries you through Saturday morning, 8 a.m. So we have a large area of marginal risk. And of course, inside that, you have a slight risk. And inside that, you have an enhanced risk of severe weather. This is a pretty big storm that's going to be developing for this time of year in the southern plains. And it's going to produce some wild weather in some places as we move our way through the weekend. And I would not be surprised if we wind up seeing a moderate risk of severe weather area being put up for Friday. And then when we go into the third day, day 3, we've got the marginal risk extending up through Pennsylvania and parts of Maryland and West Virginia. And here we have that another developing area of enhanced risk, northeast Texas, northwestern Louisiana, and southern Arkansas. Again, this is going to be in response to deep low pressure that's going to be developing in the southern plains and eventually heading up toward the Great Lakes. So let's look at the weather in the east this morning. Of course, we're having this battle with low clouds. This upper low is still there. You can still pick it out. It's weak, but it's still evident. And these low clouds are having a tough time getting out of the way across much of New England, but they are now breaking apart from New York City south and west as drier air tries to come into the equation. We also have another cold front, and this is the area of severe weather risk that we showed you from earlier, but this front moving east is weakening, and it's weakening because we have a big upper high that's building in the eastern states, and there really is not going to be any support for that front. It's just going to come basically to a crashing halt and fall apart as it moves eastward. This weather system has already reached its peak intensity. It did so yesterday, and the main low is going way up to the north and west. So outside of a passing shower when it reaches the coastline, I'm not expecting to see very much. And you look at the radar at the moment, and you do see a narrow area of showers from West Virginia on south and west into Alabama, and up around in Wisconsin we have this area of rain and even some light snows in the colder air on the western edge of the precipitation shield that's moving northward. So again, I don't expect too much of the shower activity to survive. Scattered activity out in the Rockies and in the west and on up into the northern Rockies is starting to increase a little bit, and we've got some energy coming into the Pacific Northwest as well. California is mainly dry, and so is most of the Southwest, except up into northern New Mexico and North Texas with some showers, and there's the risk for some thunderstorms there too. This is all part of the seedling process of what's going to develop out in the southern plains. So here's our current weather map. And there's that front, and you see what happens to it. Just kind of becomes very diffuse as it moves toward the east coast. There really isn't going to be much with that. And here's the low that's going to be developing out through the southern plains. So here comes your outbreak of severe weather Friday night that was indicated in the area of enhanced risk. By the way, just so to clarify, with the GFS map, when we show this, it is showing you precip intensity, and not necessarily what the radar echoes are going to look like. The NAM model shows the radar echo profile, so you can see how different it is. And of course, there are going to be some model differences, but it would certainly indicate that some of these thunderstorms are going to be able to produce some strong winds and heavy rains. And you can see how the NAM takes the radar echoes as we go through the weekend, with these lines of thunderstorms that do develop. And there's that low pressure that's in southern Missouri at the point we get into Sunday morning and starts to lift up to the northeast into western Illinois. And look at this expanding area of snow back through western Iowa and southern Minnesota, and some mixed precip up into northern Wisconsin. This would suggest, for this time of year anyway, a fairly interesting and semi-significant snowfall for some places up in the upper Midwest. All right, so I'm going to go back to the GFS, which is now in the process of the new one coming in, but we're going to just look at the old one. And you can see that it's fairly consistent as we go through the weekend. The severe weather risk shifts across the Gulf states, through the central Gulf states, and there's your low that runs up into northern Michigan with snows on the northwest side. We have a backdoor cold front that's going to come through. So after Saturday's temperatures reaching the 80s, it's going to cool off on Sunday. But you can see there's not a particularly strong onshore flow. There's just enough to cause some issues. You have the fronts get settled right about there. Here's your cold front with the developing low. And then that front backs up as a warm front. And you're starting to get under the influence of the circulation of this deep storm up into the northern lakes. And by the time we get to Monday night, we're probably going to have some showers and maybe a few thunderstorms rolling through the East Coast at this point. So we'll just beware of that. It looks like for the most part it's going to be dry until then. And I don't know about a severe weather risk with this. I would tend to think that there might be a few thunderstorms in there. I don't know if there's going to be anything severe up our way. We'll try and figure that out as we go through the weekend. Now, moving through next week, another low comes out of the Gulf states and Texas, and this one is going to be impressive to a large degree because of what's happening aloft. You have a fairly deep low in eastern Tennessee. This is for about a week from today. Models have been doing this for days now, and the GFS anyway wants to bring a storm up the west side of the along or just west of the Appalachians, and then taking it up into western New York. So this would produce probably a significant rain and or thunderstorm event up and down the East Coast, and that's very chilly air coming in behind it on the west side. So a very interesting pattern going forward. So let's look now at the west before we look at the upper air. And here we go. So we're going to go to the west now, and I'll just roll it back. And here's our first system for Saturday. Look at all this snow that it produces in northern New Mexico and through much of central southeast, the eastern part of Colorado, but particularly from the central part of the state, south and east. There'll probably be some snow in Denver from this. And then that snow continues into Saturday night into Sunday, and you can watch the low pulls out. Meanwhile, in the Pacific Northwest, you've got a system coming in on Sunday. Doesn't look all that impressive. Another one follows after that. Looks like a lot of this stuff wants to ride down the east side of the Rockies, so that'll bring in some more precipitation up for the northern and central Rockies. Here's the beginnings of that low that's going to come out later next week to impact the eastern half of the United States. But now we're going to have a big ridge building in the west, so the west may go quiet and dry for just a little while anyway. Energy starts to come in next weekend, but it doesn't really do very much until it gets down into the southern part of the Rockies, the central and southern part of the Rockies. You start to get into a little bit of precip as yet another low comes out in the longer range and goes to the northeast. So let's look at the upper air pattern, and let me, we've been saying how, models have been telegraphing this very large block that's going to develop, and this could have implications, down the road, even longer term, depending on how long this block holds up. So, we've got this ridge in the east. That's no surprise for this weekend. And by the way, just to show you, as we start off, here's that upper low this morning, sitting just southeast of Cape Cod, and you can see how small it is and how really weak it is. And this ridge is building at the same time, so it just about disappears out of the flow by the time we get to Friday morning. And then a southwest flow aloft takes hold, and this is the reason why it's going to get warm in the east, because you have this deep trough in the west, and then you've got this southwest flow going on. There's, relatively cool air from Canada is deflected way to the north, so that explains what's happening there. But watch what happens up near Greenland as we go through the weekend and into early next week. A big upper high develops, and models have been doing this for a number of days now, and it continues. They continue to do that during the overnight, and this is why there's a big system coming into the east, because anytime you have a big blocking high that develops up in this region, we've said this many times, it displaces the jet stream way to the south. I mean, this is a very strong jet stream pattern for the beginning part of May. That's some pretty chilly air. The blue area indicates the colder air, colder to normal. So, the anomaly here, so the darker the blue, the colder the air is, and the brighter the orange and the reds and the purples, how much warm above normal it is. So you have a big area of much above normal to the north and east, and that's going to have to be balanced out by a large area of below normal temperatures aloft to the south and west, and it displaces the whole trough way to the south. Meanwhile, here's a ridge that's built in the western part of the United States, so suddenly the Pacific jet is shut off. So while all this energy is piling on in the east, the Pacific jet is shut off, so this big ridge builds out. The atmosphere is getting very out of whack here. Very deep upper low forms in the Ohio Valley out of this late next week, and then lifts up to the northeast and north. The block, we continue to have above normal heights and above normal temperatures across much of the North Atlantic. Again, the jet displays south. We do have some energy that comes into Canada, out of Canada, and drops into the Rockies. You still have this deep trough here in the eastern states. So all of what's going on up here is really key to the longer-term weather picture going forward. And it's still here to some degree as we get deep into the long range. So as long as that's there, yeah, you're going to have the ridge that's going to try and pop up every once in a while for a day or so. But in terms of some sort of prolonged warming pattern, I really don't see it. And I wanted to show something that I really haven't used very much of. And I'm going to kind of look at this myself for the first time. Let me just put the temperature anomalies. All right. We're going to, you know that I'm not really a big fan of the super long range, but I thought it might be interesting to take a look at this. This is the CFS model. The problem with some of these long range models is that you can often find something that suits your fancy here. And as we go through, we're looking at the initial period, which is through today. I mean, this is the initial period, I'm sorry, that was done over the last couple of days. And I'm going to take you through now. This is an average weekly temperature. So, it could be really hot, much above normal for 1 or 2 days during the week, and slightly below normal the next 5. And, it's going to be weighted to some degree. And you could weight it in both directions. But through the 7 days ending May 4th, it's much above normal in the east, and you've got this large area of much below normal through the western Great Lakes and down into the Rockies. Going into days 8 and 14, which is May 4th to 11th, you can see the below normal temperature areas shift to the eastern part of the United States, and you get above normal in back through the southern plains, Southern Rockies, and over down back into California. And even going longer, the 11th through the 18th, a fairly large area of near or slightly below normal temperatures for much of the country east of the Rockies. And then it just kind of averages out to normal as we get toward the end of the month, and it goes a little bit, maybe a shade above normal as we start to go toward the end of May and the beginning of June. And which at that point, of course, this is long into fantasy land, and maybe a lot of this could be fantasy land. But I'm showing this because, the part that we see here and here is reflective of that big developing block. So you see what happens with no block and then suddenly with a block, okay? So it certainly is suggesting that we're going into another one of these 2-week periods where we're going to be dominated by cooler than average temperatures. So that's going to carry us through at least through the first part of the month of May. So once again, just to sort of review real fast with regards to what's happening today, get these low clouds out of the way. I'm seeing some brightening of skies out my door right now, which is a good sign. This front weakens out, and you start to see the energy coming down the Rockies. That's going to make for a fairly large storm and a significant severe weather threat beginning tomorrow and lasting through the weekend across much of the southern plains, the eastern part of Texas, and then through much of the Gulf states, and then eventually into Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, on up into Illinois, Indiana, Missouri, and parts of East Kansas. So we'll be paying a lot of attention to that as we go through Friday and through the weekend. All right, everybody, have a great day. Weather posts on meteorologistjoechaffee.com. Angry Ben sees through all the fog and low clouds on nycweathernow.com. You can download my app and subscribe to my local forecast for New York City, Long Island, New Jersey, Hudson Valley, and Eastern Pennsylvania. The app is free, and it's just 99 cents a month. The link to the app will come up from time to time at the top of the video. And you can, of course, check out all my other videos and latest posts on my Facebook page. And that's meteorologist Joe Chaffee. It's JoeCioffi. Have a great Thursday, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.